So here's some radio settings to get the Icom Ic-820H working with the CSN Technologies S.A.T controller. So from the main, you have the first set, hit function, tone. So I have the processor set to the on position. And what that does is activates the power compressor switch on the bottom. And whenever you have it on this setting, the processor is always on. Green is high power, red is low power. Obviously, this is for the linear sats. You don't want to use the processor when you're on FM, so you would have to come back in here and rotate the knob and turn it to off to do the same high power, low power setting. The rest of the settings in this menu basically have no bearing on the linear sats, but I'll show them to you anyway because you'll want those for your FM. Duplexer, I have that set to the standard. Regular 2-meter FM offset. This is where you would change your offset if you wanted to change it. The tone, so if you wanted to put, most of the FMs are a 67, so you would set your tone there. That gets you back out of it. Now the important settings to get the 820 actually running on linear sats. Turn the radio off, hold function. We'll go through the F set first. Turn it on. Some of them are just, like this one is your display intensity. So it's just personal preferences, but there are a couple settings that if you do not have them set correctly, you will not be able to work the linear sats. So display intensity I have on high. Again, your personal preference on what you want to run. The attenuator, which would be down here, on and off. I have the attenuator set for the VHF side only. I have a little bit of VHF noise here at the QTH, so every once in a while I'll turn it on. You can go through the manual. You can set it VHF or UHF, or VHF and UHF, however you prefer. I don't have any external preamplifiers, so I have this setting off. It does nothing. Your CW break-in, I have to on, which is the default. FM center indicator, so whenever you receive an FM signal, up here on the TX-RX, it will let you know if you're centered on the frequency, which does come in handy with the FM birds because, yeah, you'll be able to hear it, but you'll also have the visual indicator as well on if you're center frequencied or not. Whoop, hit the button twice. So this is one of them that you want to make sure for linears and everything else that you do have set to on. So subsetting 5 is your S meter. I'm sorry, submenu 6 is your S meter. So the sub S meter, as you can see, is turned to the on position. And here's the next critical one for working the sats. The setting 7 is your subband audio during transmit. So you can turn this either on or off. You're going to want to have this on so that you can hear yourself. Now you're going to want to have a set of headphones or something like that if you're doing any recording, because you will just override everything. If you don't want to hear yourself, then you can just turn this to off. But obviously we want to hear ourselves. And the final one is just your auto repeater setting. 2 is duplex and tone as the automatic selection, which is what I have on this one. You can either have it off or just the duplex as the automatic selection. I have duplex and tone on. So, all right. So next menu is the lock menu. Hold down lock, turn your power back on. And again, a couple just personal settings or whatever you would like. Setting 1 is beep if you want the radio to beep when you press the buttons on and off. You don't hear my beep because I do have the headphones plugged in. Next is scan resume, scan speed, fine-tuning selection. So I have mine set to 1 Hertz indication on so that allows you to see it just a little bit better. So you want that to on. Now the RIT setting on menu option number 5, and this is where we start to get to the critical portions. So the radio has a selection of 1 hertz, 10 hertz, or 20 hertz. And I'll show you a little bit later on where that comes into play. So the way this radio defaults is that RIT only operates on the main band. It shows that RIT works over here. We'll get to that later. So what I have for the SSB is I want the most RIT adjustment as possible, even though you really will find out with the SAT controller, once you have the proper settings in this radio, you won't need it. But if you do, this will give you the most sweep. You'll get a full 20 hertz sweep out of your RIT control knob. Let's see. Next one is the FM RIT, which, again, I'm not really worried about the FM RIT, so I have it on the smallest. It's on 10. Your selections there are, if I go the other way, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I had it on 100. So 10 hertz, 50 hertz, 100 hertz. So actually, I did have it on the maximum. Next critical setting to get the 820 to work with the SAT mode, or I'm sorry, the SAT controller. Took me forever to figure this one out because I kept trying to get the RIT to work on the sub dial, and I could never get the RIT to work on the sub channel dial. Come to find out that all of the settings that you can assign to the RIT or the shift and all that kind of stuff, you don't want any of them on. So you want the sub dial change to be just standard off, completely off. The options are off, RIT for the sub dial control, which you can see the sub lighting there. RIT control of the main is the next setting. And of course, somebody came in on the HF rig there. Sorry about that. Next setting is your, went too far. Next setting is your control of the shift knob, which would be on the outside for the sub band, or shift for the main band. And again, we want everything off to be able to work with the SAT controller. So make sure that is all off. Next one is the voice synthesizer for speech. I do not have that unit installed, so just go ahead and default that one to off. Next critical for setting up your SAT controller, and that is your CIV address for the radio. The default address is 42H. You can leave that exactly the same, but when you get into your SAT settings, this will be critical, because if you do not have the correct address and the correct baud rate, it will not communicate. So this is where you find it. My radio, obviously this is a 30-year-old radio. Someone had changed this address, so it did not default to where it was, and I was having trouble finding it. This is where you find it, is in your lock menu under subcategory 9. So I just went ahead and put it back to the default of 42H. Critical. Next setting, critical as well for communication with the SAT controller, is your CIV baud rate, option number 10. So the highest baud rate that this radio has, because it is a 30-year-old design, is 9600. Default with this radio from the factory is 1200, which is extremely slow by today's standards. It'll go as low as 300. Crank it all the way up to 9600, which is still pretty slow, but it works. So you want to make sure that you have that cranked all the way up. Next is your CIV transceive. So this one, I haven't been able to tell if it's critical or not with the control of the SAT unit. However, after I fixed all the other settings, and I turned this one on, because the description of it is to allow the transceiver operation as possible. When on is selected, changing the operating frequency, operating mode, etc. on the 820H automatically changes those of connected transceivers or receivers, and vice versa. So just for the sake of doing it, I went ahead and turned that on to make sure that the radio is communicating properly back and forth between the radio, between anything that's connected on the CIV. So Now the next is your just memory channel allocation, so you can separate how much memory channels that the radio has in between VHF and UHF. So mine is set on the L60, which gives you 60 memory banks for 144 megahertz, and H40 is 40 channels for the UHF. You have a total of 100 channels that you can separate however you want. I generally save more VHF than UHF, so that's why I have it set there. But as you can see, you can do a 50-50, 40-60, so on and so forth. And that is it. All right, now we're back to the main operation menu for the 820. And so this is the portion that I discovered that was after all the settings are set correctly in the radio, is the most detrimental thing to allowing the 820 to operate with the CSN Technologies S.A.T controller. It took me forever to figure out this little simple trick. And if any of you have this radio and you're struggling, this may be what your issue is. So once all your settings are correct from the previous portion, when you're reading through the CSN Technologies S.A.T instruction manual, it clearly indicates that on certain radios, including the 9700, that you have the satellite function turned off on the radio, so that the S.A.T controller controls everything and communicates and does everything that it needs to do with the radio. And the radio is basically just taking the communication from the S.A.T controller, doing what it tells it to do. Obviously, that is an extremely high-tech radio. This is an extremely low-tech radio. High-tech for its day, low-tech for today. So what I found was that through communications with Mike, one of the comments that he said struck a chord with me. As we were going over settings and trying to figure things out and all that, he made the comment to me that when you get a 9700, all of this goes out the window because the CSN controls everything. So that made me think for a second, because I was having problems with whenever the radio was out of satellite mode, getting the S.A.T controller to track properly, to have the frequencies lined up. You couldn't stay on frequency. It just did not communicate properly. Also, through doing research with the radio, as I mentioned earlier, I found out that the RIT for the radio, which is a key piece in all of the instructions on the CSN Technologies, is to set yourself and then adjust your RIT and go through all that stuff. The RIT control on this radio only controls, when you turn it on, it only controls the main band. So if you're in this setting, out of satellite mode, and you turn RIT on, the RIT knob will only control your main receive, your main band. Now, obviously, when we're working satellites, you want your subband to be your receive, your main band to be the transmit. So you're not even listening on the main band, and your RIT does absolutely nothing over here. I could not figure out for the life of me why, whenever I was listening, that when I had the RIT turned on and I was turning the RIT knob, that it wouldn't do anything. Well, come to find out through experimentation that RIT on the subband only works if the radio is in satellite mode. So what you have to do, this was the final key step in getting the 820 to work with the S.A.T controller. Function, most of the satellites are on a reverse. Let's see real quick before I show you. So if you just turn the knob, you're on the main, activate the sub, you're here. So the S.A.T controller was fighting back and forth. You would have to fight back and forth, so on and so forth, to get it to work. Function, reverse. Now we have the radio in satellite mode. So if you rotate the main knob, as you can see, one goes up, the other one goes down in correspondence to what was programmed from the factory, and what you also have your settings on as far as your hertz adjustments goes, which again, like I showed, mine is all the way open for the maximum sensitivity. And as you can see, the RIT is lit up. In SAT mode, RIT in this top corner activates for the submenu. So if you hit this one now you have RIT control over the subband. So now RIT is actually active on this side, and with the radio being in satellite mode, The SAT controller will do its thing. The radio can be adjusted for both in reverse direction from one another for Doppler. And your RIT control is also active, and you'll have 20 hertz worth of sweep one way or the other. That's the key feature right there. 9700s and all that, satellite needs to be off. 820, satellite mode has to be on, and all those other settings have to be set, and then it will communicate properly. So now I'm preparing for the next pass of RS-44. As you can see, I have RS-44 loaded into the SAT controller. It's going to be approaching from my northwest. You can see on the polar map. Then pass is selected in the top right. I'm going to go over some of the radio settings on the SAT side now. Obviously, we have the Icom Ic-820H 21 9100 selected, baud rate 9600 as we spoke about before, address of 42H, VFO type is main up, sub down, and then the update interval is 500 milliseconds. Something else that I found is the after pass action. Just go ahead and turn that to off, because the radio, again, old technology, it doesn't have any functions, and actually if you try to get it to do something, it just messes up settings. So just go ahead and set that to do nothing. One other thing I wanted to point out real quick. So now that the radio is in SAT mode, however, there is a little bit of a miscommunication, or a quirk, however you want to put it. If you're rotating, if you do a quick rotate, it will adjust your frequency way off from where you stop. See how much it drops? To defeat that, with this radio, if you hold down the scan, which will then only move that one, you can move your frequency, wait a second, and then everything is there. So once we hear a station, we'll use that method. Hello, CQ,
Kilo Charlie 0, Echo Charlie Quebec, KC0, ECQ from Echo Ic-48. Victor Alpha 3, November Alpha, thank you very much for giving me a call today. I really appreciate the contact. I had you solid into Echo Ic-48 today. QSL on the Fox November 03. Yeah, beautiful thing on the bird today, my friend. I really appreciate the contact. How's your day going? Oh, fantastic. Yeah, the 5 watts is doing absolutely good for you. Yep, not the strongest one on there today, but no problem copying it whatsoever. So, my friend, thank you very much for the contact, and I'll get to it on KC0 ECQ.
CQ, Kilo Charlie 0, Echo Charlie Quebec from Kilo Charlie 0, Echo Charlie Quebec from Echo Ic-48. CQ, this is Kilo Charlie 0, Echo Charlie Quebec, KC0 ECQ from Echo Ic-48. Hello,
Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec from Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec, Echo Mike 48. Hello, CQ, CQ, 80ECQ from Echo Mike 48. AC0, ACQ, Kilo Delta 2, Charlie Foxtrot Delta, Echo Mike 73, QSL. Kilo Delta 2, Charlie Foxtrot Delta from Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec. I got your, is it Echo Mike 33 or Fox Mike 33? Echo Mike, QSL. Gotcha, I got the Echo Mike 33 on Echo Mike 48. You sound fantastic today, my friend. Yeah, you sound pretty good yourself. Thanks for the contact and have a great day. Sounds good. You as well, sir. Thank you very much for the contact and enjoy the rest of the pass. Hello, CQ, this is Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec, AC0ECQ from Echo Mike 48. Kilo Golf 7 Charlie Whiskey. Kilo Golf 7 Charlie Whiskey from Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec, Echo Mike 48. Sound good? Roger, QSL, Delta November 14, Central Idaho. Awesome. I got the Delta November 14. Yeah, beautiful signal on the satellite today, my friend. Well, thank you. We're having trouble hearing it today. Our antennas are all wet. But thank you very much for the contact. Yeah, you're doing a good job. No complaints on this side, and good to hear you on the bird, my friend. Well, I appreciate that. Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec. My name is Jeff, Juliet Echo Foxtrot, over. QSL Jeff, and here's Rob, the Romeo Oscar Bravo. Okay, Rob, going to go 73. Thank you very much for the contact. My pleasure, Jeff. My pleasure anytime, and look forward to talking to you again. 73, my friend. 73, Rob. Kilo Bravo 8 Charlie Radio. Kilo Bravo 8 Charlie Radio from Kilo Charlie Zero, Echo Charlie Quebec, Echo Mike 48. Okay, thank you, Rob. Name here is Charlie, and we're an Echo Mike 79er. QSL Charlie, thank you very much for the contact. I've got from Echo Mike 79, another beautiful signal on the pass today. Okay, thanks for the contact. I think I have to adjust my uplink a little bit. I think I'm a little high. I moved my RIT just ever so slightly to get on where I'm at, but you know how that goes. Everybody's just a little bit different no matter what. Yeah, I guess listening here, I think right about now. Yeah, that's got it pretty much right spot on, my friend. I wish I had a scope while I'm running here at Mode Icom Ic-820, so I've actually spent the last couple weeks trying to get all the settings correct on it to get it to work with the set controller and all that stuff, and I think I finally got it. So I'm just going to fly blind at this time, you know. Yeah, my question is, I used to have an 820 hotel way back when. And I'm just now getting back into satellites. Does that actually work with SAT PC32?
I've actually never tried the SAT PC32. I've had a couple guys when I was trying to get this to work with the SAT controller and told me to give it a shot, but I never tried it, and I spent quite a bit of time trying to get it to work with the SAT, and you really have to get in and mess with the settings on it. I'm actually shooting a video right now for CSN Technologies to go up on their website so that they can put it out there for everybody that's running the 820 so they can see what all the settings are supposed to be and get it working properly with the controller. Okay, well, I'll look forward to seeing that video. I really like the Icom back then. Right now we're running a Flex 6600M with Q5 transporters.
And it's a little on the complicated side to get everything running. But once you get it clicked in with that PC32, everything runs well. I'll tell you what, Rob, I'm starting to lose the bird, so I better sign. Keep KC0, Echo Charlie Quebec, Kilo Bravo 8, Charlie Radio.
Yeah, 7-3 Charlie, Kilo Bravo 8 Charlie Radio. I don't know how much CSN will put of the video up on their site. It's going to be pretty long, but my YouTube page will have our contact on it. It's KC0ECQ and Radio Endeavors on YouTube. And we'll definitely have our contact on there so you can see what you sounded like on this one.
Okay, I'll look for you. 7-3.
7-3 Charlie, thanks for the contact. This is KC0ECQ. November 2 X-ray Mike from Kilo Charlie 0, Echo Charlie Quebec at 8.5 degrees, so it might be a little bit of a short one.
It's November 3, 123, X-ray Mike, Echo Mary 91.
Got it. November 3 X-ray Mike from Echo Mary 91. This is KC0ECQ at Echo Mike 4848. QSL.
QSL 48, good luck.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate the contact.